So, hello everybody. I'm the moderator of this exciting panel with amazing guests. I start with me because I'm the most important man. No, just joking. I have the honor actually to take my first moderation. Nobody won't believe me who knows me a little bit better, but that's the first moderation I've ever doing. So allow me some mistakes. So wrong spelling names, wrong questions. Try to stop you before you can talk everything out. So that's my usual thing I do. As I said, it's an easy one. So we have half an hour, and the topic is a little bit broad, so trends, challenges in fintech. I just would like to concentrate more on the investors, so for us as investors, on what we have to look on. So my introduction was already done, so I start with the ladies here. Effie, well-known guest here at the Swiss Fintech Investor Day, famous lecturer, writer, and researcher. Thank you to have you here. Next one is Claudio Schneider, which is also, I heard today, that is co-founder of Lend.ch, or a partner of Lend, so a startup or two in the fintech area, and you run now IAM, an innovation lab for the institutional asset management, would I say. So really this B2B space on the wealth management side. Now Jan, who does not know it, should write or read Inside Paradeplatz, then you have a lot of fun. So he's our famous guest, most famous guest, and you were one of the first fintech, and I mean fintech as a definition from a disrupting part, so you disrupted the structured product markets with Leontech or EFG products, as I heard it for the beginning or when you started. And then last but not least, Christine Ciriani, famous from CEO of Capco Switzerland. That's where I have met you the first time. And then you went to a VC Motif or private equity company in the fintech space. And now you run a company as CEO, and that's fun too. You have to maybe explain that later to me, but you're so in the middle of the battle of fintechs. Okay, I would like to start just do you do fintech investments, and maybe give us a little insight. So why have you invested in that? I start with Christine in the first.
Do we do fit? Can you hear me, by the way?
Yep. We're trying to do the technology.
Okay, does this work? Super. So for those of you in the room and for those of you on camera virtually, hello. Great to be here with such a distinguished panel. So I'm going to actually wear two hats in this answer, Ralph. So as you rightly said, and CEO of Finantix, really proud of a wealth management company digitalizing really the front end of wealth management. Finantix has invested in fintech. We actually acquired a company here based in Zurich called Incube earlier this year, really leveraging machine learning and AI to accelerate what we think is personalization of wealth management. I also have another hat, which I'm also an operating partner at Motive. And Motive indeed is dedicated to fintechs. Motive just closed our second fund. The first one was around 550 million. The second fund is just over $1 billion. And the first fund had fintechs like Avaloq, which recently exited, and others. So we obviously believe in the fintech space. 25% of all tech spend is in fintech. And we believe it's probably a space that is the fastest growing in many ways. We saw actually, particularly in this last year, the performance of the fintech companies outperforming obviously other companies in our combined portfolios with other investors. And we think actually the ability for banks to participate and for other individuals to participate in fintech growth is growing as well.
Okay, thank you. Maybe Jan, do you do personal investments in other fintechs and then your own?
No.
No. Why not?
I have enough to do with my own fintechs. So, as you know, invested in Leontech 2007 we started. And that was a good investment overall. It was 10 years and a factor of 70. Mm-hmm. And now we invested in Anova Partners, a company we founded a year ago. So it's only the own companies I invest into.
Okay, good. So you're a little bit shy in investing in other enterprises, or is it just
No,
focus?
I think it's just focus. It's just
Okay.
focus, yeah.
Good.
Absolutely.
Claudio, do you do any investments?
Yes, I invested in Lend.ch, as you mentioned before, and worked there as a partner. I also invested in 2 other fintechs, where I'm involved as well on the board or just in the background. So that's something I follow. And we are looking at many fintechs with our lab, obviously.
Yeah.
And we try to accommodate those business cases to the larger traditional asset management space.
Good. Effie, do you invest your hard-earned money into the super risky class of fintechs? Personal money, yes.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, that's good.
So you mean my bitcoins, my hard-earned
you have
bitcoins, where
bitcoins.
do I
Okay.
invest them? So personally, I've been involved in fintech for the last 6 years, and I've been investing in the public markets. So companies like Square, for example, I'm very bullish on companies like that. And then in the private space, there's 1 or 2 companies because of work as an advisory role that I've invested in. And then there's the blockchain for finance space that I'm also having exposure.
Okay, really cool. And you got already, except on Square, and unicorn status until now? Yes, you do? Okay. I have to talk with her. I follow her strategy investments. So fintech, so my personal opinion on fintech is that it was a super hype in 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16, and then it lowered down, and it was a kind of the little ugly child around the block, and now it's getting back. Do you know the reason why fintech is again in the middle of the interests of investors?
One of the reasons that I see is the fact that fintech has grown, and it's clear that the business model that is dominating, and maybe we're copying it from the East, is the platform business model. And there's a lot of rebundling going on. And one of the biggest trends in the market right now is what is called embedded finance. So making financial services invisible, and they can be embedded in tech platforms, on e-commerce, everywhere, and that sort of broadens the business scope of finance. A lot of companies are offering financial products and value add without having banking licenses, without having to go through the regulation. So I see it as the market has opened. There's more businesses building on open architectures. So it's really transformed what we call fintech.
Other opinions to that?
Yes, I agree. I mean, if you look at the UK, for example, with the UK open banking standard, you see really interesting fintechs emerging there. And they're not necessarily our banks or have a lot of licenses, but they're aggregating the services from the Barclays and the HSBCs and providing really good services. And given that we're in Switzerland, I think on that perspective, we are like 2-3 years behind. We have several initiatives in terms of open banking, but they're very segregated still. We don't have one single standard coming through yet. But if that comes, I think the ecosystem will grow rapidly. And I think that's why we're moving back into fintechs.
From Motive, have you invested in Swiss fintechs right now?
Yes, I was going to say, so the first fund invested in Avaloq, so
Oh, okay.
obviously that was the first.
I don't know them. What are they doing? Just joking.
And I think, I mean, there have been very different models, right? I think both in terms of you realize how diversified actually fintech still is, right? If you look at the first fund, Dun & Bradstreet was taken private, and then public within 1 year, so 2.3 times after 12 months. Avaloq was 2.2. I think what we're seeing is you have both the co-investment sort of large-scale opportunities, you have also the growth capital, so the companies of more than 30 to 100 million size, as well as the combination, right, and being able to build the ecosystem. I think that indeed, if you look at the overall macros, fintech has performed in the last 12 months in particular. It's grown as the overall market has grown, right? And I think we see, therefore, the de-risking of diversification in fintech. If clients and investors are looking for a way to diversify overall from just large tech, I think fintech as a means for diversification has proven itself in the last 12 months. Actually, Open Wealth, I think Simpulse launched in Switzerland the Open Wealth Initiative, so I think we're going to start seeing some of that open API and the open wealth sort of concept coming into Switzerland as well. But I think actually Switzerland has a lot of attraction in terms of the talent and the best practices that come out of Switzerland, combined with the ability to scale that outside. I think investors are looking for the opportunity to take sort of what's best practice in Switzerland, but make sure it can scale to the other markets, right? The growth, as we see, is really in the US and in Asia, but a lot of best practices are born out of Switzerland.
So we hear a lot of UK, Asia, and Switzerland is still our place to be. What do you think about the fintech? You were almost 20 years now into fintech scene, maybe not actively as an investor, but do you miss anything when you look back and look at all the companies who have maybe come to your place, knocked on your door and wanted the money? Do you see any trends there from the fintech scene in Switzerland right now?
No, I think there's no clear trend except Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, which we have in Zug.
Yeah.
And I think overall, if you look at the fintech development globally, I think it's actually quite active in last years, but we have lagged a bit in Switzerland, except this crypto and Bitcoin initiative, which I find a bit sad, right? But I think the basis is still there. As Switzerland, we have a lot of values which we can leverage on. So for me, clearly, there's some elements which should be focused on, which is RegTech, because that's something you can export from Switzerland as a product. Digital ID, for me, is also a topic which is going to be very important. And then our export good as Switzerland, I think, is wealth management, but we all know that this is going back because all the cross-border wealth management activity don't work anymore because the countries and the states want to keep that money from their people in their countries themselves. So I think what we can export is just the technology for wealth management. So AI and wealth management automation, I think, should be the third focus of Switzerland. That's why I see a big opportunity for Switzerland. I think we cannot do everything. And I would also recommend not to just only focus on crypto and Bitcoin, because there's always plus and minus. We have now around about 700 companies in Zug, but we should diversify away from that in addition to. But I think this is the focus, and we are now at, 350 odd companies or so. If you look at the new companies in fintech founded 2020, I think is over 7,000 globally. So we really should kind of get our act together and start more startups.
But your topic, as you said, RegTech could be a good place, and digital identity, yes, Effie?
AI analytics, definitely, because of a tradition, as Christine was saying, in data security, in cryptography, in artificial intelligence and machine learning, and I think really there is a great opportunity.
Yeah, I think there, Switzerland, indeed. I mean, we were really pleased about the company we were able to acquire, but I think also the talent here with EPFZ, EPFL is very strong internationally. The type of actual experience also the individuals, entrepreneurs have working with very complex business cases, very complex regulation as well. So what is exported can handle really global scale problems. And the best practices can come from here in terms of both the tools, technology, but also the data that is used to be able to manage and to have more predictive analytics. We talk about contextualized and personalized research and personalized recommendations at scale. And you can't do that if you're not leveraging technology that has been tried and trusted. And that's not just because we have CERN around the corner, and not just because we have a lot of the universities, but also we have the organizations to work with to be able to leverage the data as well. A lot of the data scientists don't come from banking; they come from pharma, they come from telecom, and they leverage that experience into financial markets.
And let me be a little disagreeing with Jan about the blockchain lead that Switzerland through Crypto Valley has. It is true that it seems as if it's all Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, and maybe it is, but there is a very healthy portion, maybe small quantitatively, that is all about open source protocols and building on open architectures. And I think in general the fintech industry can learn and build on those open technologies, which are the best way to scale and export that technology. And I think we have that. The truth is that the market has given a lot of importance on cryptocurrencies and trading and exchanges and all that kind of DApp or app, but there is a lot in analytics, and I mean I can point even to an example of Actus open source non-profit protocol and Ariadne that's built on top, that's all about creating a standardized way for financial contracts and then building on top of that. I mean, that could become has a lot of potential to become a standard globally if we water it and seed it and nurture it to grow up and go global.
I agree with you on the technology, right? So blockchain in itself is an interesting technology to be used, but the product as a coin and 700 different coins is not the product which I think Switzerland is going to win in. I think Switzerland should win in things which are really based on the value of Switzerland. There I think we can handle critical data. Of course, coins can be one thing, but critical data, which again goes into digital ID, for instance, which goes into RegTech, where you have to do a lot with kind of the critical client data. I think if you think of from which country does Switzerland want to get their RegTech services, kind of Germany, that way, get their RegTech services, rather an Eastern European country, or rather Switzerland, probably rather Switzerland. So I think given our associations which we have here, in many areas, we are kind of predestined to really focus on this aspect, and this is the critical area in terms of information. And then, of course, cybersecurity comes into space, which is really important because you handle with a lot of critical data, and there, I think this should be the next focus. And again, wealth management, AI, we have a lot to offer, and wealth management is the export good of Switzerland, so clearly that should be another focus for the country, right? And you're more leading in technological discussion, but I think on the product side, we should really focus on the strengths and the values of Switzerland.
If you mind, Jan, I will point to Claudio institutional management will also be one of the leading trends for the financial industry itself. I mean, and we're not super good on that, and your lab should help on that. Do you see in this institutional management as an investor, where should I invest in? Are there new products there or new technologies you think we should have a look on if we're going to invest in future?
Yes, I mean, we have seen one today ETF book which has been presented. So there are like very interesting fintechs coming up with add-ons to the existing industry. It's just that for traditional finance, integration is a big hurdle. So we are looking at many startups with very interesting use cases, but integrating them into traditional finance, into large asset manager is that these are really big enterprise projects, which often, you come to this point where you have to decide make or buy, and it's usually you try to make it first. So in the B2B space, I think for fintechs, you need to look at the niche as an add-on, as we have seen today, one ETF book, which I quite like, and sell this service, and maybe later you can integrate it. But apart from that, it's not easy. Yeah.
You just mentioned now that the different business models you can hook on, and the hype was on the B2C models in the beginning of fintech, and Revolut is a good example how successful somebody can be, but there's not every startup can be a Revolut. So we see, I saw a big trend to B2B. Marketplace didn't work very well. So what do you think will be the future, the next 2-3 years? Is it a revival of B2C cases? And if yes, why? Or if not, why not? Because we all know B2B is a sure winner, because it's an environment which you know, and which is easier to make sales in. Yeah, Claudio,
I think both are difficult and both are tough. I mean, B2C, I think there's a lot of still a lot of optimism around how fast you can attract users to your platform, to your product, because technically you can reach everyone today. So these fantasies around that you can build a customer base in a very short period of time. But finance is, in the end, traditional finance and new finance is about trust, and it takes just a lot of time to build this trust. And it's not easy, that's not easy in the B2C space. So it takes much longer than usually you think it does. And you have to stick with it and keep at it, and that's tough, and it costs a lot of money. But in the B2B space, we have seen it today as well. I mean, sales cycles with traditional finance, if you want to integrate what I mentioned before, we're talking about 18 months, 12 to 24 months, and you need to plan for that. So before you can test your product with a customer, with a B2B customer, with like big banks, you have to look at the sales cycle of 18 months, which you need to finance. You need to prepare to walk this long way. So it's very difficult to compare, and I couldn't tell what's better, what's easier. I mean, there are startups like fintech startups like Scalable. They do both. They do B2C, so they get direct customer feedback, they're close to the customer, and they do B2B for reach, which I find is quite interesting to have both. But both tough.
We have to, Effie, maybe you're out of your research and experience.
Well, you brought the example of Revolut,
which is a bad example because it's just one Revolut.
No, there's many, there's others, there's TransferWise and others, but I think there we see clearly that VCs threw a lot of money to these B2C consumer banking startups, and the space got crowded. And now we are risking that these companies that are overvalued may go public, and they might end up becoming like the online lenders that have lost 90% of their value in the market. So it's not clear. In a way, ironically, fintechs and all this competition and the money that's been thrown to them has cannibalized certain business models. And now we're kind of starting all over again. And there's this B2B model that, as you said, Claudio, it's not an easy model. And some are trying both. I think both is the daring success, and if you do it on open source technology, and you build on that, and then you kind of license that technology to others, then maybe you can lower your cost of serving customers.
That's a nice hint for the startups. Now, Motiv, do you invest in B2C cases?
Yes. So I was going to say, actually, we are only in B2B. Well, I say only B2B.
So now you have explained why B2C is like a devil for you.
But I think, and I think it's interesting because we're seeing a lot more also who are trying both. I think it is both daring and a little bit schizophrenic, if I want to be honest. I think it's because it typically happens when those focus on B2C, they find the client acquisition a bit difficult and they flip to B2B because B2B is more secure. right? I think for us, it depends on risk profile, right? B2C, obviously, you have the beautiful hockey stick, higher risk, much higher risk, but you can in 1 in 100 you can actually hit it out of the park. I think B2B we see much more steady returns. So if you want more conservative returns, B2B is a bit more predictable. Because you look at market size, and yes, you need to have also all the things right, but I think we see that being a bit more predictable. The one thing I will add is where we are seeing acceleration is in actually the data analytics API space, where it's not an 18-month project, right? That's something you can activate in the cloud in 24 hours. So you can actually, if you have the right data to be able to mine and do that, particularly in compliance, regulation, we saw that really pick up. We actually do have a KYC automatic tool, and we really saw, particularly in the last 12 months, that really pick up because it's something you can implement relatively quickly. So if you don't have those barriers to entry in terms of legacy, obviously that helps also be able to have a much predictable growth.
Okay, so when I summarize, the ideal fintech has to be a Swiss fintech with some flavor in wealth management, has to do with some digital identity, needs some AI, ideally does a B2C starting, going then maybe to B2B if not successful, or prove the lessons. And what did I miss? I think I missed, it has to be a Revolut in the future, right? So my last question, we're at the end of this discussion, is just, that's the fun question actually. In which, if you would get 5 million in addition from your grandpa, and he says you have to invest into a Swiss fintech, would there be a Swiss fintech except your own, Jan, where you would invest? Is there one which attracted you and or maybe missed the opportunity to invest into?
To kind of refer to the last discussion, I'm the party pooper again.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's B2B or B2C, it's the marketplace. Because what we are missing in fintech is really not only companies with good technology, good visions, but also companies with revenues. And that's an issue if you're not in the US, because in the US you can do B2C obviously easily, but over here in Europe it's B2B, and that's very hard. And we have had that issue at Leontech to onboard partners, banks, insurance companies, and it's in reality it's not 18 months, probably more 3 to 5 years. And it's not a technological problem, it's a cultural problem. So what I think you need is really marketplaces which kind of are in between this culture of the startups, the fintechs, and kind of these cultures of the big banks and insurance companies which want to talk with you and kind of integrate you. But then if it comes to the execution, das Unternehmen, etwas Unternehmen, then it kind of stops all of a sudden in lower levels. And I think that's why you need an kind of integration layer there, which are marketplaces. That's what I would invest into.
So my fun question again, do you have a startup which you would like to invest if you could? Or yeah?
So that would be the one, this marketplace.
This marketplace, which
of course I will build it up.
Okay, good.
The next person who starts it, basically.
Yeah. Christine, have you a favorite fintech here in Switzerland?
So I'm not going to name any favorite fintech, but I have to say, in terms of segment and space, I absolutely believe in digital identity space, and I think that's an area we see that again in terms of technology and capabilities, both at the universities. It's a combination of both the academic world and the practical world. I think that the regulatory application of that is quite international.
Okay. So. Actually, we got good RegTech companies anyway. Yeah.
There's actually one from an ex-Leontech employee, Claudio Schneider. So that's something you can look at.
Good, cool. What's the name of it?
Science.
Okay, Science.
I'm biased. I mean, I like the lending space, so lend.ch, but we have also seen very interesting pitches today from Evolut System Credit or ETF Book. So I think there are a lot of very interesting fintechs around in Switzerland. And yes, it would be really fun to get 5 million after this talk from you.
Well, I will answer that question too, but that's an easy one.
Yeah.
Effie, what would you do?
So
buy more bitcoins, tell me.
No. How about a company like Canopy that does aggregation in wealth management? And it is a niche where they're operating. So I like places like that can scale. It's not, high-tech proprietary sort of model, but it is very much needed.
Useful tools.
Useful tools. I would use it, or I would recommend to use it.
Yep.
And then on the sort of bleeding edge, cutting edge, more emerging, I would look at Ariadne, which is built on the Actus protocol and is really, next generation RegTech, anti-money laundering, next generation core banking, and so on.
Okay, thank you very much. My answer on that one, I would invest in another 50 companies for 20K or 50K. That's what I would do. Just not the risk, but it's more fun. I mean, that's the good thing. If you can go early stage with lower tickets, not all succeed, but we have now another 4 who may succeed. So thank you very much, and applause.